Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today's guest is Bill Sivert, CAA, Athletic Director and Vice Principal at Uintah High School. Welcome to the podcast, Bill.
Thanks, Hutch. Appreciate you having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. Why don't you start off by sharing with our listeners where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, that type of stuff.
Well, I grew up in Orem, Utah. I was born in Payson in their library. It was a hospital then, but so the Payson folk down there knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, I grew up in Orem, lived there my whole life. Went to Mountain View High School, had great mentors and coaches over the years there. I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school and served in the Marine Reserves for 8 years after that. And what else? I went to Utah State University, met my wife during a summer. While I was at Utah State, I moved home for the summer, and then when I graduated, my first teaching job was at San Juan High School, teaching English and coaching baseball. I was really fortunate that while I was student teaching at Skyview High School to have some mentors and friends up there, Rick Thorne and Chris Howell, that let me tag along and help them coach baseball. And I never really kind of got into education to coach. I played a bit in high school, and I was mostly a music guy. My family's really musical, and so but I was much better musician than I was an athlete.
Let's go back to, so you graduated Mountain View. What year would that be?
That was 1993. So
sure, you're just a youngster.
Oh, well, maybe compared to you, Hutch, but I think there's a lot of young ADs out there that are thinking I'm pretty old. So 1993.
1993. So you started San Juan in 2000.
It was a while. I started in San Juan in 2003. So 10 years later, career path was different when I actually joined the Marines because I wanted to make it a career. But as I got into it a ways, I decided that wasn't where I needed to be. And so, especially once I got married, that wasn't my career path, and education was kind of what I was drawn to. So it's kind of cool, and I enjoyed the fact that I was able to go to Logan and get a great education at Utah State University, and so yeah, it led me down there to San Juan. That's a great place. I was down there for 11 years total, 9 years.
So was Bob Peterson there when you started?
Yeah, Bob Peterson was an assistant principal. We got there the same year. So I was at San Juan High School teaching English, coaching baseball for 4 years, teaching English, and then 5 years teaching history. And then I got into administration. I was an assistant principal at the middle school down there for 2 years before I came up here to Uintah High School in 2014. I think I came up here in 14.
Well, then you know that my wife has family in Blanding. If you know any of the Blacks in Blanding or any of the Laws in Blanding, those are all my wife's family.
There's only a few Blacks and Laws in Blanding. Only a few.
Okay, so growing up, you were a music guy. So you dabbled in a little bit in sports, but mostly the music path.
I've played sports, but as number 2 of 8 kids, we were pretty poor. There was a lot of kids and a lot of mouths to feed. So sports weren't a priority. My parents weren't sports enthusiasts much. They loved watching it, but they didn't play. So we kind of just had to pick what we wanted to do. So I played up baseball up to my sophomore year, and then just felt like music was where I needed to be. I had a great instructor, teacher, Bobby Bird, and a lot of guys probably know of Bobby Bird, especially the old timer. Just a good man who kind of shaped me in my life and helped me kind of, learn about myself and what I could do. And I think there's a lot of coaches and advisors, teachers that we have that have helped shaped us over our lives. So Bob Bird's one of those.
Well, you've mentioned Bob is one of your mentors. Why don't you share a couple more of your mentors on your life's journey with our audience?
Well, there's been a lot. I think probably in my athletics journey, I coached with a man down in San Juan. He's just taken over the girls softball program again, Mike Bowers, not to be confused with Mike Bowering at JUAB.
Yeah.
Mike Bowering is a Blanding kid, and I know Mike really well, Bowering, but Bowers is just a great educator, teaches at the middle school down there, is a phenomenal coach. And so when I started coaching and teaching down there, Mike was a great mentor to me. But you mentioned Bob Peterson, who's been on the executive committee and board of trustees.
Was on the executive committee with you, probably.
No, we never
served was he
together.
Gone by then?
Yeah, but he just a great friend and mentor. When I got up to Uintah High School, Kevin Dixon has been a great mentor. He was the athletic director, vice principal when I got here, and then when he retired, I took over for him. But in the process, Rob DeCall, who's was a longtime AD at Uintah, has become a good friend. And there's a lot of people over the years that just kind of shaped me and kind of helped me figure out who I am as an educator. And it's been fun to get to know people. And I think outside of the organization, it's been fun to get to know the UHSAA staff. Being on the executive committee, that's a great opportunity to learn from them, but also especially to rub shoulders with some incredible athletic directors and administrators throughout the state. Trevor Wilson at Stansbury has been a great friend and colleague. We've been in the same region for the last several years, so it's been fun to get to know him, and he's just kind of done great things there. But I mean, I could go on and on about all the people who have influenced me, but it's been a fun journey so far. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question that was just came to my mind. It was not on the list that I sent you. You'll appreciate this. So my first year at Jordan, this is back in 79, maybe.
I was 4.
Yeah, well, in our league. So in our league is Tooele, Murray, Jordan. I think this is right. Tooele, Murray, Jordan, Carbon, Union, Uintah. And then the next year we kept Uintah. I about to tell you what, I had some long bus rides out to Uintah and back.
Yeah.
But it was great. But of course, Jordan was a much smaller school back then. 3A back when there was only 4 classifications. So now it's a large school. So it's strange how that works. Well, let me ask you this. What's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career in education?
I knew that extracurricular activities were key, especially in the secondary level, high school level. I didn't know how important they were. I knew that they were important to me growing up, but I didn't know what a key part of education they are, and how important they are to the community, especially I grew up in Orem, Mountain View High School, and when I was in school, it was one of the largest high schools in the state, if not the biggest. I think there were close to 650 in my graduating class.
Mm-hmm.
So it was big school, really big school. And so when you come from a larger community that way, I don't think you really understand the role that extracurricular plays, especially sports in the rural communities. So going down to San Juan and becoming an educator, I really realized that it's not just a game. It's life, it's culture, and and so it's really, really important to, especially as an administrator over athletics and activities, to create I guess, a partnership with the community to make sure that you're doing what the community feels is best for the community. And I know that sometimes we don't want to involve them a lot because, parents especially can kind of be a pain, but at the same time, we have to realize that this is their life, and it's not just their life, it's their reputation, it's their culture, it's who they are, and in so many ways it defines them. So I think keeping that in mind helps you have a different perspective and see where community members, especially parents, are coming from, and especially those that may have lived and grown up in the community, that they feel invested. It's them, and so it's important that we keep that in mind and we don't shut them out, that they're included in, and that we do kind of carry them forward as we progress in the cultural journey or whatever it is we're trying to do. But I think any rural school athletic administrator sees this and experiences this, and for good or for bad, I think it's part of it, and I think it's important that we keep that in mind.
Let me ask you this then, because San Juan's a rural school. Uintah, I would consider a rural school, but a much bigger. Uintah is obviously 5A now. They were much smaller when they were in our league.
Yeah.
So is there a big difference going from a city like Blanding up to a city like Vernal, or is it just a bigger version of the same thing?
Well, we have a Walmart, so that's good out in Vernal. In Blanding, you had to drive to Colorado 90 miles to get to Walmart. So, but as far as the community, I think you're right, Hutch. I think it's just a larger version of what we experienced in San Juan. Great people and a good culture. A little bit different in the sense that San Juan has they're a football town, I think, in a lot of ways. Art Burton-Shaw and Monty Lee created such a strong football community and culture then, and I think it's been around for a long time. But and in Uintah, wrestling is king, and I think that's maybe the sports are different, but I think it's still people are invested. They're
Sure.
So invested in what we do, and they watch us, and they want us to be successful as much as we want to be successful, and sometimes even more. So I think but yeah, I think it's probably just a larger version. And I think too, one of the things that's been hard since when I first came here in 2014, we were 3A, and
Right.
we were 3AA in football, but there were only 5 classifications. And so it just kind of fit in. And then when I took over the next year, we moved up to 4A. And I just remember sort of the kickback from the community, like, no, we shouldn't be so big. Like, we're a small school. And I keep throwing the numbers out and helping them, like, hey, we're actually really big. But I think it does create, San Juan was a little different in the sense that, and maybe they experienced over the last few years because they were 3A, now they're back down to 2A. But you're traveling more, maybe. You're traveling further to see schools that are bigger than you, or at least your size. And so I think for our community, maybe it's a little bit harder to realize that, we're not Union size, we're double that size. We're Wasatch size. But they still think Wasatch is 3A because, 15 years ago they were, so right. I think it's just a perspective thing, but it does pose some challenges in trying to sell the fact that, hey, we're competitive and we're tough and our kids are going to do great things. And so we're not small. We're literally not a small school.
Well, it's a tough thing because in Park City and Wasatch, they're kind of separated by the mountain range, but in 30 minutes you can beat a Salt Lake, or in 30 minutes you can beat a Provo. And the problem you experience is you go up north with Skyview, Ridgeline, Mountain Crest, all of those, they just keep their schools in that 4A population. You go to Washington County, they do the same thing. Well, unless they want to build smaller schools in Vernal, I don't know if they're going to do that, but they've got 5 schools in each of those counties, which makes a big difference.
Yeah. And for us, resource wise, to do a second school, There was a proposal when I first got here to build a second high school, but it's probably a good thing that the district didn't, because within a few months of, getting into 2015, we had, oil prices dropped. There wasn't and it's a boom and bust. We go into a bust economy, and I don't think we would have been able to financially support a second school. And so, yeah, we are big and we do travel a lot. Our travel budget is $250,000 a year just for sanctioned sports. And so,
I'm sure
that's huge. We spend $1 million in our district on athletics. You throw in that transportation part of it, and I think most of our budgets are probably the same, but then you add that transportation component with having every sport. We have every sport except lacrosse. So, we're just going, and it's huge. But I don't know if we were 3A, we'd still have to travel. We'd probably be in a region with Delta, which is a heck of a lot farther to drive than having to go out to Tooele. So,
well, I kind of laugh when people talk about travel. Schools on the Wasatch Front complain if they have to travel 30 to 35 miles. It's probably 45 miles just to get to Union, who's down a classification from you.
Yeah, it's 28 miles to Union High School, and then after that, you're 100 miles to Wasatch. So, those are our two closest schools, and Carbon's a little bit further than that. It's, a little over.
Well, Carbon, you'd have to take the you can't go into, you take the highway over the Bangor Monument in the winter. That's got to be crazy.
Yeah, it's a fun drive, especially in the winter. But
share with our listeners how the job of athletic administrator has changed since you first started back in 2014. So in the last 7 years, what changes have you seen?
I don't know. I think one of the key things, it seems like that you're more of a marketing director at times, or a PR person than dealing with the athletic side of things. And I think, selling your brand and making sure that the culture is good is a huge part of it. I think sometimes it's not by accident that you have a good culture. It's pretty intentional. And I think now it's even more so that you really, really have to work on that and create a product. It's almost like a business model in a lot of ways. So you're not setting up for games, and that's not the limit of it. You're doing so much more than that. And I think that's changed probably, when Rob was here, I think that's what the bulk of his job was hiring coaches and setting up for games and cheering the kids on. But I think it's much more than that. And I think that's just the accessibility, the media, the amount of information that people have access to, I think it creates the need for that. But it's important. But I can't do it alone. That's the other thing too. I think some of you old timers, you did it alone. You didn't have help, but now we have we have people in our building, whether it be maybe a teacher that's your sports marketing teacher that runs all your social media, or we have a district public relations person that I work closely with, and it's just nonstop. We're just constantly putting out information to help people stay in the know and be be connected to what it is we do. So I think that's changed a lot. Just we're going cashless tickets now, for crying out loud. So, and that's never would have thought.
Who was I talking to the other day? If I was still in a school, which I'm not, there is no way I'd go with paper tickets. I would go cashless tickets, and I would go with, obviously our partner, Home Team Ticketing. But knowing what I know now after this past year, there's no way I'd go back to paper tickets.
It's just, I was at Stansbury for volleyball last night, and I was asking their ticket ladies, I'm like, how do you like the no cash? They're like, best thing we ever did. It's great. It makes it so slick, and you get a couple people that get ornery if they don't they don't want to buy an online ticket. But
Right.
other than that, you know, you can deal with a couple people for the ease and convenience and the fact that, man, you don't have to worry about your ticket takers, you know, pocketing any money.
No.
You know,
I
you
can
get those
I can
stories.
remember taking the cash box down and locking it up, and at least every other time, because they you know, they had to reconcile the tickets and the cash in the box, and the secretary had called me down, and then I'd have to talk to the teachers I had assigned. Yeah, it was
Yep.
it was crazy. Let me ask you this. Do you think that in a school, for example, like Uintah, where it's the only game in town, that there's more scrutiny on your coaches than, let's say, a Wasatch Front school where you've got schools 5 miles apart?
I don't know. Sometimes I think that, but I think it depends on the sport, and I think it depends on your coach. You know, we've recently hired a new football coach. This is his second year. He's doing great things. We're still not, you know, a powerhouse program. We have 2 wins on the season so far, which is 2 more than we had last year.
Well, that's an improvement then.
But the great thing is, you know, last year at the end of season banquet that we had, well, our COVID version of a banquet, you would have thought in that room we were 9-0 instead of 0-9, because of the culture aspects. I think a lot of it has to do with it, but I think there is a level of scrutiny. I think expectations are a huge part of it too. You know, I mean, I'd love to say that all of our sports have the same expectations for the community as terms of success, but that's just not the case. And I think tradition is huge too. It's funny, we're not a football town. We won 1 state championship in 1994, and that seems to be the only thing that everybody remembers. They love football, and it's great, but we are a wrestling town, and you know, with 24 state championships, 28
Oh, yeah.
over the, you know, it's huge. And so yeah, maybe to an extent, but I think you know, there's high coaching turnover wherever you go, and there's expectations. I think one of the unique things about a rural school versus the Wasatch Front school is that, you know, we have to have people in our community. They live here if they want to coach. They don't, and they're part of our community. They're part of our building. You know, a lot of them are teachers, which a little bit different than, say, on the Wasatch Front. I was just talking to Boyack a few days ago when we were down there for volleyball, and he's telling me all these coaches that, well, they just moved into our community, or they just came from. I'm like, well, you know, we don't have that. They have to work here. They have to have a reason for being in Vernal besides just simply, you know, having some expertise and living down the road from the school and decide they want to coach. And so I think that's a difference. And so, you know, we're super fortunate. We have really high quality coaches, but a lot of them are local. They're people who are born and raised here, or have some ties to Vernal, or at least the school in terms of teaching. And I think that's important. And it's maybe a little bit different.
Allow me, if I can, to give a shout out to 2 of my former players who are somewhat prominent in your school district. One you know very well, Christy Brown Putnam, who coaches for you, but Andrea Hendrickson McKay, I think, she's still the principal at the alternative school, or she changed jobs?
No, she's still there. I just had a meeting with her on Monday, and Andy McKay, and phenomenal, does a great job at our alternative school. And then Christy Putnam, an amazing coach and teacher. My sophomore is in her class right now, my sophomore son. So
there you go.
Loving it.
I'd like to tell you that they learned all those good things from me, but I'm afraid that's probably not the case.
No, but they do say a lot of good things about you, Hutch. So that's
well,
good.
at least you know, those 2 girls started for me when they were, I think they were freshmen. I think one year I started 2 freshmen, 2 sophomores, and a junior, and they were the 2 freshmen, and they had some skills, and they were great kids. So
yeah.
What's the biggest failure in your life, and what did you learn from it?
No, I don't know. I've had too many to even count. Um, I don't know. I think probably like most recently, I love my job and I love what I do, but I think I probably failed my family a little bit in the sense that I put my heart and soul into this, and sometimes it takes away from those things that are important. But with that family time and the kids, my oldest just graduated high school last year, and I kind of feel like maybe I missed a portion of his life. He played baseball. Um, he was an average player, didn't see much field time on the varsity level. I didn't get to watch him play much because I was always at the varsity games supervising and doing stuff like that. And I didn't take that time maybe to watch him play like I should. And so hopefully I can fix that. I've got two more in high school. I've got a senior daughter and a sophomore son, and then I've got a 10-year-old son in fifth grade. And so maybe with the fifth grader, at least I can make a little bit more of a difference. But that's probably it, spending a lot of time on the road and a lot of time away from the family. But at the same time, it's a blessing in a lot of ways because my kids go with me a lot of places. My 10-year-old, my travel buddy this fall, and he has been for a long time, and he doesn't complain. He just gets in the car with dad and we go watch a football game, and he's on the sideline and he's high-fiving players and hanging out with the trainers, and like he's part of what we do. So
there you go. So that
good things and bad things with that, but
that's turned into the travel, which can be a bad thing, and gets old can be a good thing, particularly in your case. Let's talk for a moment about your journey with the UIAAA and how you became involved. And obviously you're certified now, but of course we mentioned earlier that you spent some time on the executive committee. And I don't want to say the strange things, but in Utah, you never see an athletic director on the executive committee from the 5A and 6A people. But if you're some 4A, 3A, 2A, and 1A, you see a lot of them. And so talk about your experience on the executive committee, because it's a little bit different than obviously your friends in the UIAAA.
Really from the start, I never went into education thinking that activities and athletics were going to be, such a large part of what I do. But again, as things progress, I had opportunities to kind of lead in terms of schools and be an athletic administrator, and it worked out. So when we went into Region 10 and 4A classification with Stansbury and Tooele, the Ogden schools, Trevor Wilson had been, he's a 4A or was a 4A AD, but he was the region chair and he'd been doing it for a long, long time. And so, basically I was the only AD in the region that was also part of the school's administrative team as a vice principal. And so they said, let's have Bill do this. And so I think, let's see, Brian Bishop is vice principal over athletics at Wasatch. So him and I are kind of in a similar boat. But they also have an AD, and I'm the AD here, so
yeah,
a little bit different. But I think it's good. I think it's good to have the perspective of the people that are in the trenches working with the coaches and seeing with the kids. And I think sometimes there's great principals on the executive committee, but I think it's nice to have that voice. I kind of wish we could hear more from Clayton over at Wendover, because he has such a unique perspective, being
Sure.
a small school. He does it all. Like he wears so many hats in his school. He does phenomenal work. And it's fun. And so, as far as my journey, I don't think it's anything I ever really wanted, but at the same time, it's been really fun to be a part of the process and be, I think, in a lot of ways, an advocate for athletic directors throughout the state. I know when Trevor Wilson was named the athletic director of the year a couple of years ago, it was one of the things that impressed me most about him was his push to have athletic directors to be viewed as more of administrators and as professionals rather than just the setup for games guy.
Sure.
And I think that having an AD on the executive committee really helps kind of hammer that home with the other administrators on that committee, that we're more than just, you know, set up for games guys and women, that we're actually people that we're administrators.
Yeah.
And we deal with a lot of stuff, and we take a lot of stuff off the principal's plate, and help really be a liaison to the community in terms of athletics and making sure things run. I think sometimes they think it's magic that everything all comes together. A simple event like a game, you know, you might say, well, we got volleyball tonight. I don't think many principals know what goes into having a volleyball game.
Many principals and the
tennis
public,
match, or
yeah, they think, oh, I want to be the AD. They just show up and they're at the games, and they think that all this stuff just happens magically.
they
That's
show up to
crazy.
supervise, and they're like, hey,
Yeah.
it's great. And or they might get mad, like, how come the anthem didn't work very well tonight? What's going on here? Like, can't you get that? Like, well,
Yeah.
you know, it didn't. It sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't go well. But yeah.
Speak to our audience about your decision to become certified, even though we have language in the UHSAA now that strongly suggests that you become certified. I think you got your certification probably 4 or 5 years ago when it wasn't mandatory. So talk about your decision to do that and how important that's been for you.
Well, I think I went to my first AD conference before the state one down in St. George before I took over. Kevin Dixon, my mentor, said, hey, go down. I was going to go, but why don't you go? And it's good. He says, there's some cool things about it. And he didn't say much, but I was just impressed from the get-go. And I thought, you know what, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. And I think that's important. There's also strength in the organization. There's such a collaborative feel between those in the association to kind of help you to manage. It's you know, sometimes you feel like you're on an island, especially, you know, the rural people. You're just kind of out there by yourself, and you're fighting these battles, and you're going through all these challenges that you face on the athletic side of things. And then when you get together, you realize that everybody's in the same boat and that you're all in it together. So, you know, the organization has been really important. And I think it's important too, with the, you know, being certified, to show not just your administration, whether it be your school administration or your district administration, that you are a professional and that you do take your job seriously. But I think it also sends a message to the community that you're willing to get better at your job, that it's not, again, it's intentional. I think it's important to show that everything we do is intentional. It's not by accident that and it's not simply just my own ideas. We do things for a reason, but it's not, I didn't just come up with it, that this is best practice. And I think anyone in education knows that we use research-based things to help us be better educators. That's what it's all about. So, you know, being part of the association and getting certified really helped me just be a better administrator in general. And it's helped me on the school and education side of things, outside of the athletic side of things as well. So
that's a great answer.
Great.
That's a great answer. Thanks for sharing that. Let me ask you this then. What's the favorite part of your job? Now, when I say your job, I'm not talking about the VP part. I'm just talking about the athletic director part.
The kids, absolutely the kids. I mean, whether it's, you know, see their smiles after a big win, or, you know, their tears after a tough loss, they're incredible. I mean, that's why we do this. They are incredible. They teach me a ton about resiliency and strength and professionalism. And I mean, I could go on and on. In fact, I mean, we all saw it during the pandemic. who was the strongest? It was the kids. The kids, they never complained when we implemented mandatory testing, and never had one kid complain about being there. They showed up. We did our testing at 6:30 in the morning. They rolled in, and they didn't complain. They were a little sleepy, but they didn't complain. They didn't fuss. Their parents did, but they didn't. And I mean, it's all about the kids, every single thing that we do. And that's why I drive thousands of miles a year just to watch them play and to be part of it, because they're incredible. And we all see it. And you mentioned, two people that, that have vernal ties now, that two of your former players, you maintain those connections, and that's what it's about. It's about the people and the kids and the relationships and helping them achieve their potential once they leave. So that's it. That's the best part, Hutch.
Well said. Let me ask you for your two suggestions now for a new AD. I mean, someone that's new between 1 to 4 years. If you could give them advice, the two things that they absolutely need to do in order to become a successful athletic administrator, what would those two things be?
I would say just develop a really strong relationship with your school administration, and help them realize, that you're a professional and that it's more than just a game setup person, and do your best to really embed yourself in the administrative side of things. If you're not, some schools, they all do it different. Every school and district does it a little different. I think that's important. Work well with your admin, because they'll make or break you. If you don't have a good relationship, it can be a challenge. And I think the second thing is just build those relationships in the state through the association, getting certified, attend every professional development opportunity you can, through the conferences, the state and national conference, because it'll help you be better as an educator, just all the way around. So that's what I would say. And get that CAA certification, get on that right away. Those courses are fundamental to being successful in your job, and it'll keep you out of trouble a little bit too, if you know what you're doing. So yeah, I would say that those two things.
Great answer. Thanks for sharing. What question, and well, as we wind this up now, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask?
Why I'm wearing a tie. Oh, I told you. I think I said that at the start.
That was off that was off camera. That was
started
before
recording. I got a new principal, and usually I'm kind of in a polo and I'm getting after it, but we've got a new principal this year, and she said she wants her VPs in ties, at least the male ones. So Scott Mansfield and we were wearing ties. So there we go. So
all right. Well,
it's all right. I even wear it on the way home after a game, just to make sure I don't take it off till I walk in the door at home.
Not me. On my way home, that baby would be off. So
I'll loosen it a little.
Yeah. That wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest has been Bill Sivert, Certified Athletic Administrator from Uintah High School in Vernal, Utah. Thanks, Bill, for being part of the podcast.
Thanks, Hutch. Appreciate all you do.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.